What's up everyone, welcome back to another video by clip on my YouTube channel, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to produce the Psytrance Kick that actually has a lot of depth and also to have enough of the punch. So the Psytrance Kick is definitely the most important element when it comes to the sound quality. So, beside the bass line, the kick is the sequence that's going to be repeated the most times from all other elements in our track. So we can do the simple math, like we can take the length of the track and we can say that at least 60% of the track the kick will go. And if we take the average amount of the track length in the Psytrance music, and if we say that kick goes 140 times in every track, and we can multiply that by the number of minutes that our track is going to contain the kick, we will get really high number of the times, how much times every kick is going to be repeated in our track. So this means that every single sequence that we're going to hear that much time, the more we're going to listen to it, the more sensitive we're going to get about it, and we're going to hear if there's certain errors, they're going to start bothering us more and more. So I'm sure that all of you already know that I have the full class about kick and the bass, in which I spent 7 hours talking about kick and the bass, and in which I said everything that I know about kick and the bass. But I decided to make this video just because I'm aware that not all of you are able to provide or to buy the course and whatsoever. So this is the short tutorial, and I just need to say that I will not be able to cover everything in this type of the format, like in a short videos about the kick, and that there's so many things that actually are involved when we are designing our kicks. So there's no way for me to explain everything in one short video, even if it's a 1 hour long, as I wanted only to record one part of the upcoming course when I started recording about the kick and the bass, and I realized that I actually want to say everything that I know about the kick and bass. And on the end, I ended up recording 7 hours in which I believe I explained everything when it comes to this topic. And this is why I decided to release it as a special class, because I needed 7 hours of edited and recorded material in order to explain every single thing that comes to the kick and the bass and their coloration and and all possible outcomes. So how the BPM will affect on kick and bass alignment, the bassline key and whatsoever. So I'm not trying to advertise the class because I'm sure that most of you know already about it. I just want to say that it's not going to be possible for me to explain everything about the kick in this short format. Anyway, so I'm currently working on a track that is a bit different, that it's not containing rolling bass line, it's a little bit more deeper to say. So I'm just gonna play the first part of a track so you can have the idea of what am I talking about. So it's a deeper, it's more easier bass line, it's a bit different. There are two different bass lines, and I'm trying to provide a different groove, and I really like to switch from one type of the track to another and to provide different grooves to my tracks. That way I get richer sets, and also I feel more freedom of writing a different music, because it's just making the whole process and career in a way easier and more beautiful, because I'm not stuck on producing the same type of the tracks every time. And I believe that if we are building ourselves as an artist, that we should make the wider type of the music as possible, because it just makes the whole game more interesting. Anyway, so when we say the Psytrance Kick, as I already explained, it's a really important sequence of the Psytrance track, and in a way it's always the main parts of the Psytrance music are kick and the bass. So we're gonna always put a huge attention on designing the kick and designing the bass line, and specifically we always want to have like the depth of the kick, and we also want to have the punch. So the depth is going to have the effect that it's going to make the whole track to sound massive, more bigger, more powerful, as it's going to punch in the lower frequencies, and it should not have some frequencies that are going to be bothering us in a way. So it needs to be clean, it needs to be deep, and also it needs to have punch, because the bigger the punch is, the energetic level is gonna rise up a little bit. So if I were producing like the rolling bassline track, I would most likely use the kick, the type of the kick which I use mostly, something like this. Let's say. But this kick is a bit punchier, and it's really gonna go well if I had the rolling bassline that's high in the mids and highs, and they're gonna just collaborate really good. And this kick actually was designed for this type of the tracks. While now when I use it in these deeper ones, like this huge punch of the kick, actually it's taking the whole track out of that deep zone. So when we say deep, we usually mean on the lower frequencies. So if you want to produce a track that's gonna be sounding deeper, that means we're gonna be really careful with the amount of the mids and the highs in elements that are going to be repeated that much as the kick and the bass. So we most likely, once we start synthesizing the kick, we're gonna use a little bit bigger curve, because that means it's gonna be less time staying in highs and mids, and it's gonna go much faster to the low frequencies. And if we want to produce it more punchier, we're gonna make this curve to go a little bit inside. So I do have the synthesis of the kick already. So I don't know, the end frequency 42, it really doesn't matter. I will provide you the preset for this kick, as I believe this way it's the easiest. I do have some of the EQ inside the synthesis already. Drive is a little bit up, distortion off, compression is off, or no? I do have a little bit of compression to provide a little bit of the punch, so without... So when we have a compressor on the kick and we open attack a little bit, that means the transient or the first part of the kick will sound a bit punchier, because if we open attack, the compressor will start working after it punch, so it's gonna compress a little bit the body, and it's gonna provide the effect that we increased the first part, or the punch, or the transient. So for you who don't know, the transient is the first part of the kick, or this, like, to say a burst of a sound. So all these shots, all these hits that we hear, these are the transients. So these are the some frequencies that are going like really fast, and they start to sound rapidly. So if I open, let's say, the attack on this kick, if I start tuning, I will be destroying or soften up the transient of the kick. So I do that already because I think it's a smart way to have a nicer sounding transient on the kick, because if there's no attack, it's just gonna be like super high, and it's gonna be harder for us to deal with those frequencies. So there is some type of the attack on it, and also this curve I play a little bit with it once I design it. If I click here and I zoom in, I'm zooming up, and you can see that curve is a little bit different. Anyway, I do not want to touch this kick that much, because I'm afraid I'm gonna change the sound. So, as I already said, the synthesis is one thing, because we're gonna design, we're gonna set the start frequency, how the curve is going, so how it's gonna pitch up from higher frequencies to the lowest ones, the end frequency, the curve, like how does it slide down from all these frequencies. So as well, like the whole kick, we can say it's a transient, because I don't want to open this topic, but there's a lot of topics and tries to make the kick tonals. In my opinion, once again, it's not possible to make the kick tonal. I do not say that we shouldn't change the kick frequencies in order to align it with the bassline. It's an option that exists and that you might do that, but trying to tune the kick is completely not possible, in my opinion. I'm gonna put a break on this, and I don't want to open the conversation about this because we did it already. Anyway, so because it's not tonal, it goes from 20K all the way to 42, 46, 44 hertz on the point where I set the end frequency. And now, from all of you who would say like, okay, if I want to put it, I will put here on the exact frequency of the note of the bassline, but you need to understand that if you set it over here, that means that this is going to be end frequency, which means that just before it, if it goes a bit upper, it's not in that frequency anymore, it's already in the upper frequency, and you cannot tune it. If I wanted to tune it, I would need to set the point here and to keep the last part flat, which I really do not think is necessary, and in my opinion, and I'm not saying that I wasn't doing this, I was doing this for many years, but it's just causing too many problems. Anyway, so first thing that I do, I design the kick as I think it should sound. I make the bass line, and then I'm tuning them baseline, and I'm tuning the kick and trying to find in which position is gonna sound good in a collaboration with the baseline. Anyway, so the synthesis, this and that. Now we have the processing. So in the processing, if we say that, for example, we now have the kick that's ending up on 42, but let's say it's ending up on 50. So if I take the EQ and I bring with the bell 35 hertz, I would be changing the length of the kick, and also I would be changing the pitch of it, because bringing in or boosting up some frequencies on the kick with the EQ, we're gonna actually change the shape of it. And actually we are processing it. We are not dealing with the synthesis still, but we are actually modifying the synthesis by applying some processing. So the combination of good sounding kick is nice synthesis, but synthesis is just 50% of the job. Everything else is going to be on the processing. So I would say that if someone asks what is more important, the synthesis or processing, I would always say both, because I don't see any way how one can work without another. Anyway, if there's a really bad synthesized kick and we try to fix it to sound really good by the processing, it's not going to be that possible. We can increase the sound of it, but also we cannot just expect to synthesize the kick and it's going to sound the best, because if we apply certain processes on top of it, it's going to sound better. So if you compare unprocessed kick and processed kick, if it's processing done well and correctly, it's going to sound much better. That's it. So I have this synthesis. All right. So now if I turn off all the processing, I do have the click over here. I have the hi-hat, which I like to use a lot on my kicks. There are something on 300. There are some frequencies which I don't like that much. So the first thing on the kick that I have the phase correction, but I should have this in the last part, because every time I apply certain processes, it's gonna affect the phase. So basically, I did it over here. In my opinion, in my case, it's not important where it goes, but for you who are learning what to do, I would always put the phase plugin on the end of it, because I believe it's just gonna have more sense. So the first thing I did over here, I have the EQ, in which I got rid of the lowest frequencies, because I really do not need anything under 40. And again, I'm using 30 dB, which is pretty steep. For me, I usually never go more than 24, but this kick is going to a really low frequencies, so I just felt it's gonna sound a bit better that way, and I usually keep it on 12, so now you can see. So there was some fixing here on 9000 hertz. I brought up a little bit of highs. And then is the moment when I open the analyzer and I check how it looks. Usually on this low end, I want to have everything controlled. If there's one band peaking, I'm gonna try to reduce it to be kind of in the same level. I want to have from 40, actually from 50 to 100, or to have like the nice curve that they go down, so that I don't have one band up, one band down, or they're gonna be flat. It doesn't really matter. This is the matter of taste, what shape they're gonna create, but what I think it's important is that there are no certain peaks, because those peaks are the frequencies that are gonna start bothering us. So the kind of flatter they look, the better they sound. This is always the case in my opinion. So I have this EQ GEQ 30. It's basically the same thing as this analyzer. I just have here the EQ that is by default in Cubase, in which I just fixed this area from 300, 630, 800 and 1K. Because we can see that this one is peaking, this one is going down, so just to make it a bit flatter. This is not the best, but you can see that there's some type of the curve, some type of the flow. Sometimes there's gonna be like a bell on the 1K if I want to have more punch. it really doesn't matter, but you're not gonna see one up, one down, one up, one down. So I'm gonna always try to find some nice curve in a frequency response, because I believe they sound much better that way. Another thing that I really like to do is to use multiband Pro MB from FabFilter, and basically I'm trying to compress the areas, and also I try to find the best sounding effect when it comes to the attack and release. So if I So this is exactly what I was referring to when I say the depth. So now, why didn't I use FabQ3 or something? Because if I do with FabQ3, that means in the whole length of the kick, if I use FabQ3 without dynamic option, so regular bell, if I were using FabQ3, it would affect the kick in its whole length. But this is not what I want to do. As I already was referring to the punch, I want some frequencies to stay in the punch, but when it comes going down, I want to compress certain frequencies. And this is one of the most important thing, and that I didn't saw that many people are talking about when we are dealing with the fast music as the Psytrance, like 140, 145 BPMs, with such big amount of information in all of this, the decay, the length of this frequency is going to be extremely important. Of course, now we can speak about that, like you could fix that in the synthesis if I were moving down, but when we start synthesizing the kick, everything is so touchy. Like just a small touch and changing this curve over here, it's gonna change the sound completely, because we are dealing with such a small amount of time. The whole kick here, it's like 200, less than 200 milliseconds. So we are dealing with some movement of the frequencies in 200. So if you change it just a little bit, it's going to change the whole shape of the kick. So this is why small detailed fixing are much better to do later on in the processing, not in the synthesis. So that way I have here, I was opening attack until I found that the punch is staying in the first part of the kick. But once the transient is done, I want to compress these frequencies, and that way I don't have this kick that's already like ta ta ta, that has like a lot of mids that are staying a bit longer. That way, compressing them and closing them a bit faster, I still have this punch on the first part of the kick, but then on the second part I have this depth because I'm clearing out or compressing these frequencies. So this is one thing. The another thing is my favorite, one of the latest favorite EQs. It's called split EQ. So this is an EQ that reminds on FabQ3 as well. And what is different, it for each bell or for each frequency we have two different knobs. One is tonal, another is transient. So this is exactly the same as a kind of a dynamic EQ, while for each bell you have two options. So the first part or the transient part is going to affect this first part of the any sound that you want to apply to. So the tonal is the second part. So for example, it's like kick that we can, with this EQ, we already have set dynamic EQ that we can, with the blue one, we can affect the tail or the body of the kick. And with the green one, we can affect only the transient or the punch of the kick. So what I like to do for this type of the tracks to provide even more deeper kicks is to have this high cut, and then I do the high cut only on tonal. So I'm not affecting the transient, I'm affecting only the body of it. That means that after the punch, it's gonna clear out all the high frequencies and the mid frequencies as I have set it over here. So the difference. Now this is really precise work, and I believe that most of you maybe won't be even able to hear the differences, but in my studio, on my equipment, it really have really good effect. It's like making the whole kick to sound more clear, and like there's a punch staying, and when it goes to the second part, it just makes it to sound more clean and also deep. So this is the second thing, and in the end I just fixed up the phase. I'm just did here for -19 just in order to make it in a good collaboration with the bassline. As the bassline also, I usually open both of them and I try to find their best sounding spots, and for kick and bass to make them align to sound the best as possible, and then to find on which phase positions they're gonna sound the best. This is another thing. So that was it for now, but I just wanna make you to hear maybe in this part of the track. Okay, just I really don't like the Psytrance kicks without the, yeah, again, I forgot to say there is a limiter on the end, because sometimes I boost some frequencies and I put the limiter. I do use the invisible limiter G2 because it's gonna reduce, or it's gonna cut the peaks, while FabQ Pro L2 I use on the master channel when I do not want to affect the transient, because it's a true peak limiting, while the invisible limiter is not. So I use both of them depending on which situation I am and depending on what I want to achieve in certain process. So for now, I really wanted to cut this transient, this peak, and to keep it limited. While if I didn't want to affect, or if I wanted to keep the transient, I would use Pro L2 in a true peak limiting mode. I just want to unmute this click over here and so if I were using this kick, I don't know, when I put it in the mix, when track is done already, and I'm mentioning this once again, that I believe that the detailed processing, detailed decisions about the kick and the bass you should make once you have the track on certain level, which means the best would be on the end, because you will have all the elements. You would be referencing your kick much better in referencing with other elements of the track. And also you won't be able, if you start on file new and you design the kick, you're listening on the solo, you don't have any reference, it's not mixed with anything, so the decisions you're gonna make are not going to be clear because your perception is not right. So now when you have the rest of the elements and everything inside your track, you can actually listen to the kick, how it sounds on solo, well, on the part where the kick and bass are only going, for example this part. And then you can check also like when the hi-hats come in, or the snare, everything like. So it's the decision about how the kick should sound is going to be combination when you listen it on the solo, and combination when you listen it with the rest of the elements. So I believe that most of the people who are stuck with the kick and bass, the first thing I would consider doing is maybe using the template in the beginning, or something that you know that sounds good already, and then once you have the track written, maybe you can start designing your kick. And as I believe, if you just make the opposite order, it's gonna save you tons of time, because you're gonna get rid of working in empty project, which is not gonna give you the end result for sure, because once you start adding the other elements, you're gonna need to change the kick in order so that you can have the better collaboration between of them. All right, so this was a short kick tutorial. As I already said, I already have the whole class about it, but I really wanted, yeah, I have this Alien Art First Contact that was which I tried to reference my track with as well, to try to find like the kick position and everything. So I was listening to this and trying to make it to sound similar, even though I believe it sounds a bit different. You can find the track and listen to it. I don't believe it sounds the same, because I just having something in your project once you are when you are designing something, it's really good, because reference is really important. Otherwise you can go in completely different direction. The more time you spend on working on a certain sounds and processings, you're gonna get hypnotized, so you're gonna lose the reference. And it might happen that after you work on your track without listening to anything else, and you work on a kick and bass, and then you hear your favorite sounding track, you feel it that this track sounds completely different, because your reference or your perception has changed. Anyway, this was the short tutorial about the kick. The bassline maybe I'm gonna do in another one, because it's also complicated. But anyway, so this was it for this week. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon with another video. Bye.